Welcome to the Holistic Kids Show. My name is Zane.
My name is Abdullah.
And my name is Imad.
So we're the Holistic Kids here to educate us kids from the inside out. Imad, when you look in the mirror, what do you see?
I see my body.
Well, did you know that on you and in your body, there are trillions and trillions of tiny microscopic organisms that live in and on us, from every inch of our skin, mouths, digestive tract, and more. We actually have 10 times more bugs than human cells. So technically, we are more bugs than human because there are approximately 360 million microbiome genes for every human gene.
What? That's a little scary. Are you sure? Aren't we talking about sci-fi?
No, these bugs can determine our brain and body health for better or worse. Actually, the rise of obesity, autism is actually a rise in us kids having bad gut bugs.
This podcast is getting crazier and crazier. How is it possible that bugs, I don't even see them living all around me, such as big difference on the brain and body?
Well, today we're talking to one of the leaders in the microbiome, and here's what's cooler. He actually only lives very close to us.
Wow, that makes him extra cool.
Well, today we are joined with us Kiran Krishnan, who is a research microbiologist and has been involved in the dietary, supplement, and nutrition market for the past 20 years. He is a frequent lecturer on the human microbiome at medical and nutrition conferences, and he is an expert guest on national radio and satellite radio, and has been a guest speaker on several health summits as a microbiome expert. He is currently involved in over 18 novel human clinical trials on probiotics and the human microbiome. Kiran is also on the scientific advisory board for 7 other companies in the industry and has published clinical trials in peer-reviewed scientific journals and several global patents in his name. So thank you so much, Mr. Kiran. We are so honored for you to join us today.
It is my pleasure. How are you, neighbors?
We're doing good. How are you doing?
Excellent, excellent. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, so I heard your introduction. You're absolutely right in that we have more bacteria than anything else in our system. And in fact, one of the most alarming things is the number of genes from microbes that we have, right, versus human genes. So to put it in context, we have human genes, we have about 22,000 human genes, right? And that sounds like a lot, but know that an earthworm has about 32,000 genes, right? So we are less cool than an earthworm is. Right. And so then the question is like, why are we so sophisticated? Right? Why do we have this kind of technology? How can we think about things the way we think? At the end of the day, it's because we have like 2.5 million genes from bacteria and other microbes in our system. And as you guys know, and maybe a lot of the kids listening or people listening, that genes are the codes, right? And the codes allow us to conduct different functions. So you're absolutely right in that our system is far more microbial than anything else. And in fact, the microbes dictate our functions and our capabilities every single day.
I mean, it's amazing how each of us are different because of our genes, mostly.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, when you think about the human genes themselves, they code for things like, your hair color, your eye color, and so on, things that show the physical differences. But, when you eat food versus me, if I eat food, right? And if we eat the same food, let's say you eat an apple, I eat an apple. what happens to that apple in our systems can be remarkably different. And the difference in what happens to that apple, how much it's digested, how much of the nutrition from the apple I absorb versus you absorb, what is produced as new compounds from the nutrition in the apple, all of those things are dictated by the different microbes in our systems because they run the whole digestive tract, right? So some people can eat certain foods and be completely healthy and it's good for them. Others will eat the same foods and it actually ends up being not healthy for them and not good for them, right? There are some general rules where certain foods are healthy for most people, but in general, but in some cases you have to get specific because some foods will be good for me and not good for you and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, also how it's amazing how each fruit has their own polyphenols, right? And that's really beneficial for like the bacteria and everything. So it makes a huge difference in your body. I mean, we talked a lot about how the benefits of different colors of fruits and different kinds of fruits in general, right? That's why we like to eat so many diverse diets and so many diverse fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, and you guys probably eat better than most kids, right? Because you've got the knowledge, you got the background, you've got a mom that's really helping design what you put in your body. And I think the important thing is that we have to think about when we're eating food, we're not just eating for us, we're eating for this amazing rainforest of microbes that live in your gut, right? And so you mentioned polyphenols. That's an awesome word. I love polyphenols, right? Polyphenols are the chemicals and really not chemicals, nutrients that come out of fruits and vegetables and all that. And those feed certain bacteria, and then bacteria will convert those to substances that are really good for our cells, for example, right? The little engines in our cells, the mitochondria in our cells, right? And those engines have to be repaired on a regular basis. And you need the polyphenols and you need the microbes to convert the polyphenols. So most things that we've all heard about as being good for us from a diet, from a perspective, and things to eat are normally good for us because they do something specific to microbes, right? You guys have heard eating fiber is really good for you, right? Like, yeah, and you probably try to get as much fiber as you can into your diet, right? Well, why is fiber good for you? Well, one of the key reasons is because fiber feeds certain groups of bacteria that are really important for health. And then these bacteria convert the fiber into compounds like short chain fatty acids that reduce inflammation, that help your metabolic system so you don't put on too much fat, your blood sugar is healthy, you can build muscle, right? All of these important things, your brain can function properly. All of these things happen because of the fiber in the diet, and then your microbes converting that fiber into good stuff, right? So same thing with proteins, and same thing with a diversity of plant-based foods and all that. The reason many of those things are good for you is because they're feeding different types of bacteria, and those bacteria will convert them into useful compounds.
Also, I just want to clarify, do only fruits have polyphenols, or what about vegetables? Do they also have those?
Yeah, so certain vegetables can, if they're colored vegetables, right? So beets, for example, would be considered a vegetable, but beets, being a deep red color, will have polyphenols in them. The biggest source of these polyphenols are things like berries, cherries, so blackberries, blueberries, cherries, and then citrus foods, like limes, lemons, and so on, oranges will have different kinds of polyphenols, but also have polyphenols in them. And in general, kids today, and certainly adults in the Western world, just don't get enough polyphenols. They just don't. People don't focus on eating enough fruits, enough vegetables, right? Especially kids. I know with my kids, we struggle with that all the time. What they want is chicken nuggets, right? They want hot dogs. They want mac and cheese. That's the easy stuff, right? But we're very specific. You have to get these polyphenols in. You have to get the fiber in. You have to eat your broccoli, right? You have to get all the specific groups of foods because they feed different groups of bacteria.
Yeah, so just to clarify for the audience, polyphenols are what makes a fruit healthy for you, basically, right? Is that correct?
It's a very important component of what makes a fruit healthy for you. Yes. Now, some fruits also have fiber in them, which is another additional healthy component. And then there are some specific polyphenols called carotenoids, which are like antioxidants in the food. So those are also healthy. So some of those are things, but polyphenols are very important.
So, I mean, it's so amazing to see someone so passionate about the microbiome and about different bacteria. So, what made you start studying the microbiome in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it started with a movie, really. Yeah, a lot of things come down to movies, all right? I was always a science nerd. My mom was a doctor, or is a doctor. She's a medical doctor like your mom. And my dad was an engineer. So they had two different parts of the science world, right? One is the biological science, the other one's mathematics and the hard engineering science. I always kind of fell in the middle. I love the biology, but I was also intrigued by the math and the science and physics. But I'll tell you a story of how I got interested in just biology and medicine in the first place. So I grew up in India. By the way, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Is there feedback when I speak?
No, there's
No, it's clear. Okay, good. I'm hearing a little feedback, so I want to make sure you're not hearing it. Okay, good. So I was I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old, right? I lived in Malaysia at the time. You guys know where Malaysia is?
Yes.
In Southeast Asia, right? And so I grew up in Malaysia and in India. So I lived in Malaysia, and my mom had a clinic. And the clinic was called Clinic Kiran. It was named after me because I loved the clinic so much, right? I would always go downstairs. We lived above the clinic, and the clinic was downstairs. So when she would go downstairs to see patients, I would go down and I'd try to figure out what she's doing and see what she's using and all that. So one day when we were in the clinic, this guy comes hobbling in, and he's messed up his foot somehow. And I looked at his foot, and his big toe was about 4 times the size as a normal big toe, right? It just looked terrible. He dropped something really heavy on his big toe. So it basically almost crushed it. And now his toe is swollen, and he was in so much pain. He was agonizing in pain. And immediately I was intrigued. I was like, oh my God, what is she going to do to fix his toe, right? Because this guy was clearly in pain. So then I asked her as soon as he came in, I said, Mom, can I watch what you do? And she said, okay, sure. So she brought him into the exam room, and she sat him on the table. And I'm like, how is she going to bandage it? What is she going to give him some medicine? She proceeds to get these tools out that look really scary, right? And I'm like, what is she doing? That doesn't look like it's going to help at all. And so what she ends up doing is she ends up grabbing and pulling and removing his nail, right? And to me, that was exactly the opposite as I would ever think. It looks like she's breaking his toe more. Right, yeah, she's breaking it more, right? But what happened when she pulled his nail off, it alleviated all this pressure of all this blood that was bleeding under his nail, and it couldn't get out. And that was the thing that was causing him the most pain. So surprisingly, when she pulled his nail off, all this blood oozed out, and then he felt huge amounts of relief, right? And he was absolutely happy after that. She gave him some medicine, she cleaned it and wrapped it up and sent him along. And then I saw him a couple of weeks later, and he was basically fine, right? So that really got me interested in biology and medicine and human medicine and health, because what I realized then is she had a knowledge base that allowed her to help this guy, and the knowledge is required because to help him was not obvious, right? I wouldn't think that you would break the toe more to help it, but she knew that because she was trained, she has the knowledge, she did the studies, she knows how to do it, right? So that's what really got me excited about human health and science and medicine. So then I went to college and I said, what am I going to study? Right? I have to study some sort of science. Then I watched this movie called Outbreak. This movie Outbreak, you may have seen it. It's an older movie now. It's with Morgan Freeman and Dustin Hoffman. It was about a viral outbreak in a town, right? So it was like an epidemic, a pandemic kind of movie. And so there were all these scientists chasing this virus to try to figure out what it was and what the cure for the virus is and all that. And so I became really intrigued at studying microbes from that. And my idea was I want to chase viruses and bacteria and so on, right? And so that's when I started studying microbiology, and that's how I got involved. But I realized quickly when I started studying microbiology that there's only a small percentage of microbes discovered that are actually bad for you. Most microbes discovered are actually good for you or benign. So I became very interested in studying the microbes that are really good for you. And that's where the microbiome comes in, because the microbiome is typically a majority of microbes that are good for you. Now, if you screw up your microbiome and you do the wrong habits and behaviors, you're going to allow the bad microbes to grow too much, and then your system is not going to work properly. But it's also possible to shift it back and bring the good microbes back and allow them to proliferate.
That's so amazing how you took inspiration from your mom, helping patients, to you now teaching other people about microbiome and bacteria.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you guys? What has inspired you to think about the microbiome, to think about health, and to start this holistic kids show?
Also, our mom as well. We saw her helping other people as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a common thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you gotten to meet her patients and all that before and see the impact she has?
Yes,
we have.
Yeah.
It's amazing how the diet, the lifestyle helps other people heal besides us.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the thing is that's important is that knowledge is power, right? And if you can give people knowledge about their health, about their health choices, then you give them the power to be healthy. And so what you're doing is really important, and especially if you have kids listening, right? Because this is the time, your age is the best age to really start setting up your health so that you can have resilience, right? You can be resilient. You can deal with things and be fine. You can make mistakes and be fine, but this is the time to do it. And your microbiome is very important in that.
So let's dive in deeper about what we can do to help our gut stay healthy. So probiotics are like the hot topic in health and gut health, but there are so many different strains like lactobacillus. So what kind of strain should we be looking for?
Yeah, that's a very important and great question. So I would say first, what you would need is strains that have good clinical trials behind them, right? And the reason for that is because probiotics are microbes. They are complex organisms. They have many effects in the body. And if there's a strain that there doesn't have good clinical studies behind them, then you really don't know what it's doing in your system. So it could be doing something that's not that great for you, right? You just won't know it because there's no studies to support it. So step one is making sure that you have probiotic strains that have clinical studies, right? Now, how do you know if a probiotic strain has clinical studies? One of the ways of doing that is by asking, healthcare professionals or doctors, right? Like your mom, for example. She will know which probiotics have clinical studies and which ones won't. Or when you go online and you search for probiotics, you want to see on the website of the probiotic that they talk about some clinical studies that they've done, and they talk about some effects that the clinical studies have had, right? So that's an important thing. The second thing is dose. That higher and higher dose doesn't really matter, right? So lots of company probiotics, they promote 50 billion, 100 billion, 200 billion. There's very few studies showing that the higher the dose, the better, right? It's really about the quality of the strain and what it does in your system. And most probiotic studies have been done with doses of 3 to 5 billion. So if a probiotic is really pushing very high doses, then you know that there's probably nothing much behind it. and that it's really trying to trick you from a marketing perspective to think it's very effective, right? So you want strains that have clinical studies. You want strains that are somewhere in that 1 to 5, 6 billion level. If a product is pushing doses that are higher than 40, 50 billion, then you know they're just talking about the dose too much, and there's not a lot of substance behind it. The other thing is you can have lactobacillus that's really effective. You can have bifidobacteria that's very effective. You can have bacillus that's very effective. You can have Saccharomyces that's very effective. It just matters which one has studies behind it, right? So that's the biggest criteria. And you also have to be careful about two other things. One is products that have too many strains in them. So sometimes you look at a probiotic and there's 15, 20, 25 strains. That's too many. You just don't know how all those bacteria are going to interact with each other, right? So you want to make sure that these products are focused and have 2, 3, 4 strains in them at most. They don't need 15. They don't need 20 and beyond. And then the last thing is a lot of the products that are found in the refrigerator, right? Because if you go to the health food store, you'll see some probiotics are in the refrigerator. If those products have to be in the refrigerator for them to function, and that they will die if you don't leave them in the refrigerator, then they're not going to survive in your body. And because of that, they're probably not going to help you very much, right? So those are some things to think about when you're looking at probiotics.
Yeah, and if you have any other questions about bacteria and stuff, always ask your doctor, because they learned all of the knowledge about bacteria, and they know a lot more than probably Google, or they can explain it a lot better.
Yeah, and there's a lot of misinformation on Google, unfortunately, because think about it, anyone can put anything on there, right? So people put lots of nonsense information on there. So qualified health practitioner like your doctor or nutritionist or a naturopath or whatever they may be in your area, somebody that's trained, somebody that sees patients and works with clients, they will typically have much better advice on what probiotics will help.
So we have also heard a lot about spore-based probiotics.
Mm-hmm.
When would you use that? Is that important for us kids?
Yeah, so my kids have been taking spore-based probiotics since they were about 2 weeks old, right? So I'll explain the relationship a little bit. So spore-based bacteria are found all over the outside environment, right? They're naturally occurring all over the world. They are some of the earliest microbes that were present on Earth, some of the earliest cellular life. In fact, there's some evidence that they could have come over to Earth from meteorites from outer space, right? So they are space-dwelling microbes that have bombarded the Earth early on and added to the initial life forms on Earth, the cellular life on Earth, right? So these spores are very unique. They're everywhere. They're very resilient. They're in our system, and they're in the outside environment. Now, think about a baby, right? You guys are all babies at one point, and maybe babies right now. Think about a very unique feature that almost every baby has. The babies love to put everything in their mouth, right?
Yeah.
They put everything in their mouth, right? They put their own foot in their mouth as much as they can, right? Anything they get to pick up, like if they see something, they grab it. The first thing they do is they put it in their mouth, right? So imagine our ancestral babies. They're born outside in the environment. You put the baby in the ground. The baby's going to put dirt in his mouth or rocks or even dried dung of animals, right? They put everything in their environment in their mouth. The reason for that is there's a evolutionary advantage to getting microbes into your system. And some of those microbes that come in to your system when you're doing that are spore bacteria. And one of the cool things that spore bacteria do is when they get into the system, is they can read the microbial environment of your gut. They can identify bad microbes and actually sit next to them and kill them off. and then they will actually identify the good microbes and they'll help them grow, right? So they're like the police of your gut. They help bring down the bad guys and increase the good guys, right? And we've published lots of studies around this showing it. And so when you think about a modern day kid who's born in a hospital, in a sterile environment, the parents are typically cleaning everything around them, right? Cloroxing everything, sanitizing everything. Nobody's putting their babies in the dirt anymore, right? And so the kids just don't get that exposure they need to. They need these microbes. So from day one, it becomes really important for kids to get these spore-based probiotics in, because these spores go in, they police the gut, they increase the good guys, they decrease the bad guys, they make sure your gut is not leaky, and they also produce nutrients for you. They produce enzymes, they produce vitamins, they produce antioxidants, they do all kinds of really interesting things. So we've evolved with these organisms over hundreds of thousands of years, but only recently have we basically divorced our interaction with these organisms because we live in sterile environments.
Yeah, that's amazing. How babies, they're already learning about, they're already helping their body by putting more bacteria and different probiotics and stuff in their mouth already.
Yeah. And they do that naturally, right? So if you think about it, now at your age, you guys were all babies at one point. How often do you examine something you find with your mouth? Right? You just don't do it anymore. Right. If someone hands you something cool, like let's say this is something new, you've never seen it, you touch it, you feel it, right? You look at it, and you might smell it maybe to see what it smells like, but you don't put it in your mouth, right? And the reason for that is you've evolved past that stage where your gut is being built and so on, your microbiome is being built. So we have to pay attention to these behaviors that humans have, that the babies early on, because they're trying to seed their gut and build their gut microbiome, they put the environment into their system.
So another thing that I heard was that how important pomegranate is compared to other fruits, right, and other vegetables. So why is that, and why is it so important for our gut and our microbiome?
Yeah, so part of it is the carotenoids and the polyphenols. Right. So, in fact, now that you say that, I'm actually drinking a drink here that is pomegranate based. So right now I'm drinking pomegranate. It's really good to reduce inflammation in the body. And we know inflammation causes disease. And also the components in the pomegranate are converted into a set of compounds called urolithins, that then help the little engines in each of our cells, right? All our cells have these engines called mitochondria, and those mitochondria make energy. And what happens as you get older is these engines start to die slowly. And we have a mechanism of fixing these engines. The problem is you need these polyphenols, you need these carotenoids from these types of fruits to be consumed by the microbes, and the microbes convert them to urolithins that fixes the engine. Now, if you don't fix your engine, what happens is the cells don't make enough energy, your organs don't function the same, your brain won't function the same, you can't build muscle, you can't get fit, you can't perform well in school, you don't sleep well. All of these things start to break down just because the engines in your cells aren't functioning properly.
Yeah, that's why we always love to get pomegranates,
Yes, I love pomegranate.
Yeah, they're amazing. We love it as well.
Yeah, now do you have a trick for getting the seeds out of the pomegranate itself?
Yeah, we use water. We'll cut it open.
Yeah.
Put it in the water, and usually,
So yeah, usually we cut it, and then we take it, and then we just eat it.
We also do that sometimes.
You just bite the whole thing and eat it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Get rid of like the white stuff and just eat the rest.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the other ways is like if you cut a pomegranate in half, right? And you take one half of it and you take like a spatula and you hit the back of it, all of the seeds just pop out.
maybe
That's
we'll try that next time.
Yeah, well, we should try.
Yeah, that's how I do it. I get all the seeds out. I love the pomegranate seeds. They're one of the best things to eat.
Yeah.
And so remember that some of the best foods for your gut microbiome and the bacteria in your gut are berries, pomegranate, all kinds of different fruits that
Like
will.
cherries.
Yeah, cherries.
Yep.
I think, yeah.
Cherries are a good example. And then anything that has fiber in it, so fiber and polyphenols are really important. And kids really don't eat enough of this stuff. Like you should be able to sit down and snack on a bowl of berries, right? And you can eat as many of them as you want. You can eat a bowl of cherries. You can eat olives. You can eat pomegranate. All of these good things. And keep in mind when you're doing that, you're feeding your microbiome and you're feeding your own cells as a result of it. And you're feeding those little engines in your cells.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And remember to go follow Dr. Kiran on social media. There's so much to learn from him.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. And what is the thing that fascinates you, if you don't mind me asking you guys a question? Because I love kids that think about the microbiome. What is the thing that is the most mysterious or fascinates you about this world of microbes that surround us?
So mine's like, how do they work? Like these species, like how
They're
do
inside
they,
of us and on top
Mhm.
of us.
yeah,
Everywhere.
Everyone.
how do they like work?
Yeah.
Not like work,
General.
just like, yeah, in general.
Yeah. And so one interesting thing about it, if you have to think about two things, right? One is how do they communicate?
Yeah.
Because they're working together, right? So how do the different bacteria in our gut, the different species, how do they communicate with each other? And number two, how do they make things, right? Like they make stuff all the time. So that's a very mysterious thing because they're very primitive, simple cells. One of the ways in which they communicate is they spit out chemicals into their environment, right? So our human cells communicate the same way. We have this area of our cells called the extracellular matrix. This is the space in between all the cells, right? And all the liquid in between the cells. So our cells, when our cells want to communicate with other cells of ours, they'll put out compounds into the extracellular matrix that other cells can pick up and get a message from it. Bacteria do the exact same thing. They have their own little environment with their little extracellular matrix, and they put out compounds to communicate with each other. And so each bacteria then knows what they're doing and what they need to focus on doing. Now, they also have really awesome machinery on the inside. They have the capability of producing proteins and so on, so they can take substances in, and then their little production machines on the inside will produce new substances and they'll spit it out, right? But that's really fascinating when you think about it, because keep in mind that bacteria have been here for probably a couple billion years before humans.
Yeah.
Right? So they've been doing this much longer than we have, right? So they know about this stuff much better than we do.
Yeah, that's why bacteria is just so fascinating when you actually look into it and you start figuring out different things. Well, this was so empowering. Like we
So
said,
empowering.
So empowering.
I love it.
said, remember to go follow Mr. Kiran on social media.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kiran. Let's recap Mr. Kiran's key points that he discussed here and also have heard from his other talks.
Being the gateway to our health, your gut is the first to come to contact with the universe and the first line of defense between you and the universe. Your gut houses about 70 through 80% or even more than your immune system and houses trillions of microorganisms that can charge of your health and decisions. We are more microorganisms than our human cells.
And remember, knowledge is power. Our age is the best time we can set ourselves up for resilience.
Also, the more diverse your microbiome is, the healthier you are. So take care of your gut bugs. We need to eat more real food, specifically polynomials, vegetables, fruits, healthy fats, protein, that are micronutrients in our foods that help our gut bugs. Specific types of foods feed different types of gut bugs, like how pomegranate only specifically feeds Akkermansia. The more diverse your diet is, the more diverse your microbiome is. Our ancestors ate about 600 different types of food, so go once a week to an ethnic market to increase the diversity of the foods you eat, and we love to try new foods and new vegetables and new fruits.
Remember, you are feeling not only your cells, but your gut bugs and feeling the enzymes of the cell.
Also, find a probiotic with strains that have studies. So ask a healthcare professional to see what types have clinical studies. And also, the higher dose doesn't even really matter. So look for ones with less strains. And you don't want to use probiotics that need to be refrigerated. Otherwise, if they can't even survive like the regular weather, they need to be cold. How are they going to survive in our gut? So spore forming bacteria are also very important for us kids. And spore based bacteria can identify bad bugs and kill them off and help the good bugs grow. They also make nutrients and enzymes and vitamins and antioxidants and prevent leaky gut.
Other things we can do to keep our gut healthy is go outside. Get outside nature at least once a week for 30 minutes.
Lower things that can kill your good bugs and toxins and chronic stress.
Remember, small changes over time constantly can create a profound effect in your health. Thank you so much, Mr. Kiran. We know you are incredibly busy, so we are so honored that you can join us today.
It's my pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Zansari.
I'm Abdullah.
And I'm Imad.
Follow my family and I on social media, Holistic Mom with You, and look out for my mom's book. She has written a lot of them.
Yes.
Kids need to learn from other kids. Please download our podcast in iTunes and leave reviews so other kids and families can benefit. We need to work together to create a healthy future for all of us and the planet. Join us next week for another episode of the Holistic Kid Show, where kids are empowering kids. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.